super excited because I want to share with you kind of like the behind the scenes of when I'm doing a pen on paper illustration. So the one that I'm redoing today is going to be this piece right here. It is one of two pieces that I'm doing for a current patron of mine. And I would say that out of all the commission requests that I receive, a ink on paper illustration is like the most requested one. So in this video, I'm just going to be sharing with you some tips and tricks of things that I keep in mind when I am planning out the composition of a piece, and also like my process throughout creating an ink illustration as well. So with a piece like this where there's very little room for error because it is a commission and it is being purchased by someone, there's a lot of things that I keep in mind when I'm planning stuff out, so that way like I'm not 2 to 3 hours into a piece and then realizing that I made a mistake that I can't fix or change and then having to start over, which has happened before. So yeah, this will just be like a cozy like time-lapse chatty video where I'll just be sharing with you some takeaways that might be helpful for you when you are doing your own artwork. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I've basically almost finished drawing in with pencil the composition of my piece, and then just took a step back and looked at it, and I noticed that even just from gauging it by like measuring with my pencil, that there's more space on this side than there is on the left-hand side of the paper. So what I'm going to do just to even everything out is that I'm going to draw some lavender that I have on the left-hand side also onto the right, so that it balances in the composition as well. So my go-to pen for almost all of my illustrations is the Pigma Micron pen. Typically I use the 03 size, which has a nib size of 0.35 millimeters. And I always recommend that when you are starting with your pen to paper that you always start off with the focal point of your illustration. So for me, with the composition of this piece, that is this large artichoke flower. Because this artichoke is so geometric, I've definitely taken a lot of time to pencil in like all the details of the flower, so that way like when I'm going in with pen, I don't have to worry about whether or not it looks correct. I'm just kind of worrying more about like adding in little details and creating depth. Another thing to consider when you're drawing an illustration, especially a floral one, is to be thinking about overlap. So if you start in the center, you can kind of start gauging like what petals will be falling forward and covering certain other petals, what petals will be falling back. And so really taking the time to use your pencil and just very lightly sketching in where certain things will overlap. That way later on, if you're thinking, oh, I want to build on with this flower, or oh, I want to like throw something that's going to be touching like the first couple petals of this flower, you can just take your eraser and then just erase parts of it off. That way things can overlap and create like a level of complexity within your piece. Another tip when you're drawing petals and drawing flowers is to picture all of the petals coming from the center of the flower. So most petals, if you look at them, they're going to taper at the very tip at the top, and then they're going to taper at the end, kind of like the part that connects it back to the flower. So as I'm drawing this zinnia, look at how the lines are tapering at the top, at the very tips and the edges of the flowers, and they taper again as I pull them back into the flower. Doing this also helps to know like which petals go in front of another one. And you should always typically start at the center and then work your way out. So going back to the idea of overlap, when you're initially blocking in your details and your designs with pencil, I have always found it really helpful to start leaving some blank spots as you near the edge of a flower, because that way it gives you some room and flexibility to add something and overlap something in front of it. And then if you decide not to overlap anything in front of it, then you just go back in and just kind of close up those gaps. Another recommendation is to have your laptop or your phone pulled up in front of you so that way you can pull up different reference photos. Because I do botanical illustrations and my style is very realistic, I always want to make sure that I'm studying the flowers that I am drawing. That way I know the ways that the petals unfold, the ways that leaves grow out of it, like how many petals are within each flower, what does the center of the flower look like, etc. So the trick with using references is obviously you don't want to copy it verbatim from the photo that you use. You want to use multiple references so that way each flower or each botanical piece becomes your own design, but everything looks anatomically correct. Another way to add some complexity to your illustrations is to be thinking about how you're representing textures. So if you look at the lavender that I'm drawing right now, the body has almost a stippled effect to it to create that sort of dense thickness of a little lavender, whereas the petals that come off of the lavender are just done in very smooth singular strokes. Same with the zinnia flower that I drew above of it. All the petals are in smooth single strokes, whereas the lavender, I'm hinting at the depth of each piece by stippling in the details. And another thing is you don't have to add every single detail. You just have to add enough of a hint of the details to create that sense of depth. So as I'm drawing, just kind of be thinking about what textures are being conveyed within each part of the illustration, and how are you creating that texture. When I'm drawing flowers, I like to think of the way that each petal is curving. So depending on the position of that petal within the flower, it's either kind of slowly unfurling or it's already kind of laying out. Depending on the angle that you're looking at it, each petal kind of has its own different way of folding. So when I'm drawing in the details for each petal, I'm thinking of the way that each petal is curving, and I'm drawing all of the lines within each petal in the same direction for the most part. Or if there's a shadow, I'm drawing all the lines of that shadow within the same direction as well. I'm also thinking about ways that I can add either a second line to a petal to create the sense of weight and depth in that petal. I'm using the word depth a lot, but it really does create that realism and really makes it pop when you're drawing a second line around each petal to show that that petal is really thick and has some weight to it. So just little simple things really make the illustration, especially a botanical one, pop and shows you what petal is really thin and really delicate and which ones are really glossy and really large and kind of have a really nice weight to them. Another useful tip as we're nearing the end of this illustration is to move the paper around, to move your sketchbook around as you're drawing different angles within your illustration. So by moving the paper around and not just your body around, you're utilizing the natural rotation within your wrist to create very fluid lines. So even though I'm not doing that in this video, just so that way the camera can stay on a consistent focal point. Like usually when I'm drawing without a camera, I am moving the paper around, I'm shifting the sketchbook around, so that way all those lines just have that like natural fluidity from just the way that your wrist is moving back and forth. Also, give yourself breaks in between. It allows you to just get like a fresh perspective on your progress, and if there are any trouble spots that you had on your illustration, it gives you time to step away from it, think of any solutions, think of like the right way to fix things, and then come back with like refreshed energy and a refreshed way of looking at everything, so that way you can like really create like the perfect design. And lastly, gently erase all of your pencil marks, put in your signature, and you are done. Here is the finished piece. That was my process for how I create my ink illustrations. I hope that you found something useful from watching this video and had a couple takeaways on things that you can apply as well for your own art. And I've been doing illustrations now for like 3.5 years or so, so it has taken a lot of time to incorporate all those things. So if it was overwhelming to like consider all those different elements that I talked about, like be patient with yourself. Start small, like start with just maybe one object to be drawing so that you're not worrying about too many things all at once. Just make sure that you stay consistent, because that is the biggest thing. Like at some point, like your technical skills, what you picture, and like your own muscle memory will like all come together, and you can start creating art that you're like super proud of, and like it is exactly what you envisioned. So just keep at it, which is like the only like biggest piece of advice that I have. So thank you again for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.